Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today we are going to be taking a look at these Teatime Florals. I think that they're super cute. And then I also pulled out these. It's like the floral petals background, and I can't remember the name of the hot foil one. I didn't end up using them, but if you're not a hot foil person, I just wanted to mention that the stencil is the same pattern if you super love the pattern. So what is the point of today's video? The point of today's video is removing a pattern from a stamp to make it more versatile. So the first one that I'm going to stamp of this, obviously this stamp is drawn with a check pattern, but I wanted to be able to use it solid because I think that that makes it a more versatile image. And here is how I kind of get more bang for my buck. I am going to stamp this down in our no line coloring ink, and then I'm going to outline it. That's basically my trick. Now, some of you may be saying, like, I have no interest in doing that, and that's totally okay. You can use the stamp set as is, which I am also going to do by stamping it in our intense black ink, which is safe for Copic markers. I'm going to be doing the two cards. They're basically the same layout, but just with two different looks because one has a pattern and one does not. I will warn you going into this video that my allergies are acting up again. It seems like it's been every weekend for all of September, and I'm really very much over it. But here I am, struggling through. Thank you for joining me. So anyway, I stamped the flowers that are part of this set. I stamped them twice because I am going to be die cutting them out. Real talk, I probably should have stamped them on two different pieces because the die cutting was just a little bit too close. I was able to make it work considering I had already colored everything. I wasn't redoing it. That would be insane. But just so you are aware, two of those fitting on an A2 cardstock with the die cutting is a little bit too close. So here is where I'm going in. This marker is an EK Success journaling pen. It is also safe for alcohol markers. These particular ones, you can't really find them in stores anymore. But a suitable replacement, and the ones I used before these and the ones I will go back to are microns or Copic multiliners. And so some of you are going to be like, I'm not really interested in doing this. To me, because I outline all of my stamped images, because I like a bold black outline, this isn't any big deal to me. I also do this, like I have to do this outlining technique anytime I do the mirror technique, because it stamps so faint that I have to go back over it. So it didn't bother me to do this. And I'm pretty much willing to go the extra mile if it means that I am going to get more uses out of that stamp. So you can see here, and you'll be able to see when I zoom in, that you can still faintly see those lines. By the time we're done, you won't be able to see them. So the first one we're going to color is the black and white check one. And I am going to be completely, maybe you guys recognized this right away. Maybe you did. Me, not so much, and I had to have somebody point it out to me. So when I saw the check pattern, I was like, I mean, it's pretty, but I don't understand. But apparently, I'm not hip and cool, and I don't know what's popular. There's this whole company that does these check teapots called Mackenzie Childs. I think that's what it's called. And they're hand painted. They're handmade in the US and then hand painted. And there's a whole aesthetic about their, what did they call it? Their courtly check, something like that. I would be interested to know if you are familiar with this. I was not. But anywho, what I've done here is just some color mapping, so I know where I'm going to be adding my shading. So that is why I used my lightest color for my black checks. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to do all of the white shading first, because sometimes when you're using lighter colors next to darker colors, you can kind of drag the color out of the darker portion just by touching it with the lighter marker. And I know that I'm a bit of a messier colorist, and so that's guaranteed to happen to me. So I'm just starting with my lightest color to create the white checks. Anytime you're coloring something white, you're just adding the shadows. So you do want to leave some white in the area, but you're just adding some shadows. For the spout of the teapot, I didn't leave any white because it's pushed behind. So there would be more shadows than there would be on the front of the teapot. For my black, anytime you're coloring something black, you want to put some black in it. It doesn't have to be a ton, especially if you're trying to get shading. You'll be working with a lot of darker grays, but I have found that I am happiest when I put black into it. That's when it looks more like a true black to me. So for the shading, and I did kind of just speed this up just a little bit in certain sections, because I am making 2 cards and I'm Copa coloring both of them. It is a longer video, and it did take me a little bit of time. So for adding the black on the squares, I'm really just doing a line on the sides and then maybe just like rounding the corners a little bit, like just adding a little bit of shading in the corners. And then I will go back in and blend that out with some darker grays. I am doing more of a center highlight on the squares because the shape of the teapot is round. Each portion is going to have a little bit of a highlight. You'll see more towards the end how I push the handle and the spout into the background, but for the most part I colored them exactly the same. I did, and you'll see when we get there, I did have to go back in to the bigger squares and add more of the dark gray. I just hadn't gone out far enough and it didn't look right. The top ones, the ones that are smaller, should be a little bit darker than the ones on the wider portion of the teapot, and so I did have to make some adjustments for that. With that said, we have, like I said, I feel like these allergies have been every single weekend in September, and I'm not a fan. The other day, Peanut also has allergies, and I'll be interested to see if my little jelly bean does as well. But he takes, typically it's a Benadryl, and a lot of times he can get away with just a half a one instead of taking a whole one, but we take it before school. And we were rushing out the door the one day and trying to get him where he needed to go, his sister where she needed to go, in a timely fashion. And so we had been rushing out the door, and he was like, I forgot to take my allergy medicine. So I looked in my purse. I didn't have any Benadryl. I was dropping Caitlin off at daycare, and our daycare is a in-home daycare. So when I dropped him off, I asked the lady who runs our daycare, I was like, do you by chance happen to have any Benadryl? And she was like, I don't. I only have Zyrtec, like the liquid for kids, for Zyrtec, which I didn't even know that was a thing that they had in liquids. And I was like, nah, it's okay. So then when I got back in the car, I was like, let me just right quick do some Googling to see if he can take like adult Zyrtec, because that's what I take, and that's always in my purse. And so I did do a little bit of Googling, and it said 6 and older, because it's only 10 milligrams. And so I was like, okay, that should work. Here we're moving on to the plate. I chose to color the plate white. I am going to do the cup in the same check so that it matches its set. But I am going to do the shading a little bit different. I'm going to do all of my white shading first, and I'm not going to go square by square. They're just too tiny for that. Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense to take the time. So I did just a general overall shading, and this is the same way that I will do the other cup that is solid, which I didn't leave them both in because you can see it here. And then once I was happy with that shading, then I'm going to go in and do the same thing kind of with like the color mapping for the black checks and the brim. so that way I know what I'm supposed to be adding shading to. That is super helpful to me to make sure that I don't accidentally color, two right next to each other. So, anyway, so I asked him later on if it worked for him as well as the Benadryl, and he said he thought it worked better. So, like, that would be helpful if we could just all be on the same allergy meds, except for me. Most of the time it works. Like, all week long, it's worked just fine. Today, not so much, and I think it's because by the end of the week, I am dehydrated, I think is really what my issue is. I know coffee counts towards your daily intake, and I do drink quite a bit of coffee, but I also drink tea in the morning. That's like my first beverage of the day is hot tea, and then after that I switch over to coffee. I'm really terrible about drinking the waters, and so I think by the time I'm getting to Saturday, I'm like super dehydrated, and my body is like, no, like we can't keep operating with what you've given us. We have to act up to get you to pay attention to us. Because sometimes when I drink, like if I drink like a 20-ounce Gatorade, or if I drink a couple bottles of water, we're going to talk about the card. So here's how I'm going to push them into the background. I'm going to add some extra shading where they are meeting the teapot. So I just added a little bit more shading of that C5, and you can see it kind of pushes them back and makes the image a little bit more three-dimensional. So here, as I said before, you can still see the plaid to some extent, very little, and I chose to color it a very light color on purpose so that you could see that this will work with pretty much any color combination. You do have to color the entire image, okay? In the middle of this, I had to stop and refill my C1 because it was just, that poor thing was sad and tired and dried out. But so you do have to color the whole thing. You have to go over all the inks in order to get rid of the pattern. And this was the lightest combination that I could really think of that wasn't, a color. And I wanted to be able to show you that, that this really does work. And in the final product, you can probably see it just a smidge in the right light. But for most of us, like most of the time I would be coloring it a color and not necessarily just like a steel or a silver teapot, which is kind of the vibe I've got going on with this. But anywho, so if I drink Gatorade or if I drink water, like sometimes it will kind of turn my nose off so it isn't running all day. It doesn't always work. And then the other thing that I can do sometimes that will work is if I drink enough fluids and then take a nap, that will sometimes stop it. But I really wish that I could figure out what was going on here, and why this is happening to me. It's been a long time. It's been ever since I had Nathan, and he's 9, that I have been suffering through at least 2 days a month where my nose will run and will just not stop. And sometimes it's more than that, like this particular month, and we're on the 17th, it's been 3 times already. And it's so frustrating because it's very hard to accomplish anything, even as something as simple as taking care of yourself or your kids, when you're constantly having to stop what you're doing because your nose won't stop running. Anywho, that's not even what I meant to talk about today, but that's clearly where we ended up. So I am praying. I am hoping and praying. We're halfway through. But so I am risking doing my voiceover while little Miss Caitlin is napping and my husband is cutting the grass, because we're trying to fit so many things into the day. And that's just the way it is when you got 2 kids and, household responsibilities. Like, you just kind of got to make it work. So I'm risking it and hoping that she will sleep through for at least 26-ish minutes, and I'll be able to finish my voiceover. So here, all of the coloring is done. I did go in for the one that I have not already outlined, and outline that one as well. Again, not necessary for the vast majority of people, but I just really like a bold black outline, and so that is why I do it. But your image will still be beautiful whether you did this or not. And then once I was done with that, I went in and added some tea or coffee to the mugs. I am adding the shading for the coffee or the tea, whichever you prefer, with just 2 brown colors because it's such a small area. It wasn't really necessary to use anything more than that. I just added a little bit of shading to the left and the right, and then closest to the mug lip in the front. For the flowers, I did speed this up because the main focus of the video was to show you how to remove a pattern, just to make your stamped images a little bit more versatile. So I wanted to show you, you guys know that I don't like to cut anything out, especially if I see a card. I want to know all the steps that they took, because maybe there's a step I'm interested in that's different than the step you're interested in, that's different than the step that she's interested in or he's interested in. Keep saying interested, Kelly, because every time I say it, I have a harder and harder time pronouncing it. I'm going to move on, guys. So I wanted to include it, but I didn't necessarily take the time to focus on it like I usually would. For the flowers, I do just want to comment on my choice of colors. The reason why I chose such bright colors, besides the fact that I like them, is because I have a black and white teapot. And because black and white is such a bold contrast, I knew I was going to need some bright, bold flowers to complement that. Doing a black and white, like a bold contrast like that, and doing some more grayed out type colors would maybe make it look less black and white and more like just a little bit like a dirty gray. I don't know any other way to explain it. Like I needed them to be the same level of intensity so that they would complement each other. So the 2 florals, I colored them exactly the same. Like I'm going to show you one and then we'll move on to the next one. And I tried to stick to colors that would work really well together. A yellow, pink, and a purple. The yellow and purple are complementary colors, so they're always going to look really nice together. And again, a very sharp contrast. And pink is a good buffer, I think, for most colors, but not everybody feels that way. So once I go through and do these, then we will do the die cutting and kind of start building our card. So while I am risking doing this voiceover while she is taking her little nappy, it's because we are going to a pig roast tonight, which, I mean, I don't even really know that we're there for the pig roast. I mean, we're really there to see our friends. It is thrown by a friend of ours that used to work at, well, Eric still works there. I used to work there, and that is where I knew him from, but now he and I both work for the same department. He left first, and then I followed suit. So his pig roasts are always super nice because it's a good mix of people I work with now and people Eric works with now and people I used to work with. So it's always a good time to go and see everyone, and it's family friendly. So unfortunately, Peanut is with his dad this weekend, so he will not be going with us, but we'll be able to take Miss Caitlin so everybody can, you know, kind of see her before. When did we do that? We did the police versus fire softball game, and that was the end of August. I think that was really the first time anybody had seen her, because we don't take her, we don't take her anywhere. Mostly because we don't go anywhere. I mean, we really don't. We work and stay home and take care of our kids and take them to their things. So hopefully, we'll be able to spend some time visiting, but you know how it is when you go anywhere with your children. A lot of times you just spend time kind of chasing them around. Um, she isn't walking yet, but she is starting to pull herself up, if you can believe it. Yeah, so she's been crawling for quite some time, and now she's starting to try to pull herself up to standing, which is good and sad sometimes. Like, it's a little sad. So last night when I was putting her to bed, she I when I put her to bed, so we go upstairs, I read her a story, and then, or whoever puts her to bed, like if it's me or if it's my husband, or even if we're not home for some reason and it's one of her grandparents, it's she gets her little sleep sack on, we read her a story, then I turn on her sound machine and her little stars, her night light goes on, the big light goes off, and she goes to bed. Now, whoever it is usually sits in the rocking chair until she falls asleep. We haven't gotten to the point where we can lay her down and then just beat feet. So, she, now, because she's more mobile, she likes to play in her crib for a little bit. She's not upset, she's not crying, but she just likes to play around in there. And so, last night, I was like, I've been sitting here for forever. This baby has gotten till 9 o'clock before I get up and walk out. And at 8:58, she finally fell asleep. Like, I was in there for almost a full hour waiting for her to fall asleep. But anywho, my point was, while I was sitting there in the chair, she was pulling herself up with her, with the side of the crib. And she started to lose her balance. It was sad. I felt bad for her. She went to go catch herself, and instead of catching herself on one of the slats of the crib, her arm went through the hole between the slats, and she hit her head. Oh, it was so, obviously, I, picked her up, rubbed her head, comforted her. She was fine. She was back to being a happy baby in like a minute, but I was like, oof, man, learning to stand, it's rough stuff. So, we had a similar situation today, and I was sitting right in front of her, but she was trying to stand up, and she kind of like tripped over my leg and fell. Fortunately, she didn't hit the table, because like I said, I was sitting right there, but she did hit the deck as far as the ground is concerned. But I mean, that's just the stage we're in. So, now that the coloring's all done, I'm going to put my coordinating dyes in place. And that is one thing that I will say that I genuinely love about Honeybee's dyes is they come pre-snipped, so they're not connected to each other, and they give you a roadmap of where they go. There's like an outline in the packaging so that you know where to stick them back to. Love that. It's so helpful. So here, I kind of have everything laid out how I want it to look. And like I said, originally I was going to use those, the stencil and the hot foil, but because of the check pattern, it was just too busy. I couldn't make them make friends, and that's fine. I'll use that product, in a different card. But in order to do something to the background that would kind of bring everything together, but it wasn't going to be, anything that would distract from the, teapot, I just did a really simple little frame. So I did about a 1/2 inch in. I used my grid paper pack as well as a T-square ruler to get everything lined up. And then I did this for both cards. For the sentiments, I am going to stamp them in our embossing ink after I treat with my static tool, of course. The static tool I use is the Cottontail brush from what is it? The Rabbit Hole Designs. And fortunately, Melissa from Honeybee carries it in her shop as well, which I totally love. I love companies helping out other companies. But anywho, so after it is stamped, I'm using some white detail embossing powder, just cleaning up any areas. This I can be a little less specific about because I am going to be die cutting them out, and the Honeybee dies are pretty close to where like the edges of the sentiment are. So once that is all melted and all good to go, it's cooled off, I'm going to put my dies in place and then run these through as well For the building of the cards, I pretty much just glued everything down flat for this one because there was just so much going on. I didn't really feel like I needed to add any extra interest. And I even kind of went back and forth about whether or not to add some ground to it. And that just felt like it would take away from the look of it. So I didn't even do that. And normally I would do that with everything. So I glued those two pieces down flat. I'm going to put my plate down first, and I do think that it was a good idea to make that a little bit lighter by doing it in the white, because then it kind of breaks it up from the cup to the teapot. And I did the other card the same exact way, just gluing everything down flat. The only other thing that I did, which I'm sure you guys will not be shocked to know, is I went in and added a little bit of shimmer, just because I like the shimmer, but that isn't something, again, that, like, that's a personal preference thing. I use the clear glitter. I like the clear Wink of Stella and also the Nuvo clear glitter pens. I like both of them. And then that's it. That is both cards. So I will be interested to know which one you prefer. Do you like the pattern? Do you like the plain? Because everybody is different. And also, did you know that these teapots were a thing? I want to know that too. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.